The Chronicles of a Mediocre Magician. Yeah, we're not making the playoffs. Good morning, my beloved students. Professor Adeline Smith welcomed them in with a warm smile. I hope that we are all well rested and ready to go. Andrea was not among the faithful who expressed their mild excitement, for she was not at all raring to go. The first thing that had her so tense was that the first rankings list was to be posted today. Andrea had scored decently in the theory tests, showing that she was not a complete fool, contrary to what her peers might think, but for her practical test, she had done terribly. Professor Goldman's test was simple enough. Get into the arena and go one-on-one with her. The practical was so ridiculous that Andrea had to take a moment to come to terms with the fact that this was her life now. In order to avoid being sacrificed to the primordial force that gave every being on Earth life, Andrea had to beat up a petite 90-year-old Jewish woman. This was just her life now. The fight had gone, predictably, catastrophically. Andrea had hoped that perhaps the professor would have gone easily on her. She could not have been more wrong. Andrea could not have landed a hit even if Goldman went blind. And unfortunately for her, the look of disgust told her that was not the case. "You're going to die," Goldman said as she dodged everything Andrea was throwing at her. Andrea hoped that the professor was referring to the end of the year and not to right this moment. Either way, the comment had made her angry enough to throw a patch of dirt toward her professor. The move had been easily dodged, as Andrea had expected, but it had given her the opening needed to lunge at the smaller woman. She had done it with her eyes closed. The move had been a Hail Mary, and she was surprised that her arms wrapped around the narrow hips of her lecturer. The idea had come to her from lovingly reminiscing about the time her mother Judo slammed her to the ground, and Andrea had watched a few wrestling videos on YouTube to try and prepare for this. Even blind, she had successfully pinned her shoulder into Goldman's midsection, giving her the leverage needed to lift and throw the smaller woman down to the ground. At least, that had been the plan. When Andrea moved to lift, she almost felt her back give out. Embarrassing, at her young age of 16, too. She felt an elbow slammed into the top of her braided hair, and she fell to her knees. When Andrea looked up, she froze as the woman's cold gaze bore down into her soul. Grappling? Goldman's right eyebrow rose. Okay then, grappling. Andrea never saw her move. She only felt the arms wrapped around her, pinning her arms down. Greco? She asked, tossing Andrea as if she were a salad. She had barely landed on her shoulders and rolled onto her stomach when she felt Goldman's arms wrapped around her shoulders and neck, and the squeeze tightened. Or catch. Andrea felt like she was being choked, and when she thought that she was going to pass out, she felt herself flying through the air, turning, and Andrea was back on the ground again. Well, not really, as her feet were dangling in the air, the professor's hand clamped around her neck. Andrea hoped that the tears were because of the choking, and not because she was being a bitch, but she was thankful that the arena was empty all the same. The class were outside, for each had to wait their turn as they came in one by one in alphabetical order. "Do you give up?" Goldman asked. Andrea felt the words on her tongue, but her mouth was clamped shut no matter how much she wanted to say it. The grip tightened, and Andrea tried to pull Goldman's hand off her, but she might as well have been trying to tickle her for all the good it did. "You die for a failing grade?" Goldman asked, and it was enough for Andrea to start sobbing, and that was all the professor needed. She gave Andrea a few minutes to recompose herself before she said, "Hurry up, Miss Salem. I have a few more students to fail." Andrea took the hand she was offered and let the professor help her up and left to go and find Aisling. She did not look for long as someone said, "See, I told you she'd cry." She set off running after that to go and cry elsewhere. Thankfully, her flopping the practical for Arcana, 1A, was less embarrassing and violent. When she tried to create a fireball with no hand signs, only a puff of smoke emerged. Professor Robertson was kind enough to mark her effort down, smile at her, and congratulate her for at least knowing how to do the damned spell. Her attempts to create water did not even bring about a drop, even with the hand signs, and she did not even try to do anything with air or earth. He thanked her for the attempt and dismissed her to call in the next person. Mathematics 101 and English literature obviously had no practical tests, and so she scored well there. A 6 for mathematics and a 7 for English literature. She was on the verge of crashing out over the 6, but had to be talked down by Aisling, who told her that it was a pretty good score. Andrea was not convinced until she had a conversation with Professor Shevchenko, who reassured her that the highest grade was not a 10, as she had assumed. Milton's good lecturing led her to scoring a 7, but Magic Society 1A, which was also theoretical, did not go as well as hoped. Throughout the test, she could not help but think of Anansi, and she wondered if that was his doing. No, he said that my mind was not open to him, not enough to read it anyways. Suffice to say, she forgot why Robert ran and why his wife resorted to the use of puppets. Her results said that she had put up a sufficient performance, and she almost passed out because she had never seen a 4 grade in her damn life. But it was apparently a bad C. Andrea had tried with all her heart to bind to the housefly, a magical wand that just anyone can bind to their soul, but said object was set to disintegrate 5 minutes as the wand evaporates into nothing. Again, at least that was the idea. Unfortunately for Andrea, she could not do it, and so she never saw the wand disintegrate. Professor Kumar was kind, as she had come to expect of him, but Andrea knew that it was up for her in that module. The second reason she was not up for today, Anansi had been haunting her in her dreams more and more often. Worse than that, the dreams were seldom about her education, which to his credit, he had been of great help to her. But instead, it was usually to yap about just about everything under the sun. The man would go from talking about his favorite food one moment to yapping about 17th century West African politics in another. Well, okay, she liked listening to him talk about the politics stuff, and even the food, as much as she disliked the fool known as Anansi, and God knows that she damn near loathed him. He had well earned his title as the god of storytellers. All the while, Andrea's questions went unanswered, and she was forced to sit there as an imaginary doomsday clock ticked away over her life. "I know that most of you are worried about the rankings," Smith said. Her smile, creepy, yet somehow reassuring in equal measure, shone upon those she knew would be sweating most. Her professor's eyes lingered on Andrea a few seconds more than her other peers, making her want to throw up. Andrea knew that she was looking at an uphill battle, as the modules that had practicals accounted for 60% of her grade, proportionally speaking. "Remember," Professor Smith said with an index finger extended, "your rankings are from 1st to 400th, and we will be going in alphabetical order. So, Mr. Baldwin, if you would do us the honor." "Ow!" Aisling said, pulling her arm away from Andrea's vice-like grip. "What the hell?" Andrea turned to Aisling and gulped. This is going to sound hella ridiculous, but I think that I'm sort of freaking out." Her friend was good enough to keep her laughter down to a snort. Stop! Andy, I haven't heard something that ludicrous in a very long time. But say that you were freaking out, I'd have to ask what the hell for." She looked at Aisling as if she had just grown 2 heads. "Bruh, please be serious. You and I both know I can't magic worth a damn." Aisling conceded the point with a sigh. "Sure, but you're not entirely pure thick in mathematics, and I might go so far as to say that you know your stuff in English Lit, too. They'll carry you through." Andrea did not like her odds. Even factoring in her good grades, they did not offset her terrible performance in her practical classes. 2 good grades, 1 mid-grade, and 3 grades of hot trash. Yeah, we're not making the playoffs with that record. She saw Liam Baker walk on by, who gave her a reassuring smile that Aisling noted. "First Thomas, and now Liam. Andrea, you truly have no shame." She rolled her big brown eyes. "Relax, bruh. He only fucks with me because we're both fellow Americans." "Oh," Aisling muttered, "but he seems so Smart. It was one of the few instances in which she was happy to have faked her name, seeing as how she was actually supposed to go after Liam and ahead of Edison. If she was not too busy having an internal crisis, Andrea would have been able to appreciate more the dark and lovely Peruvian who made his way to the front of the class to check his name. I swear to God, Andy, were I a looser woman like you. Loose? I'd shift the hell out of him. Bitch! Who is loose? Juliet Capet was next, and Andrea stopped her prayers for good grades and instead focused on hoping for the girl to trip and fall on her face, and then die. Andrea was 50% certain that Juliet Capet was one of those magical supremacists Andrea had heard about, 75% sure that it was Juliet who would leave her notes mocking her impending doom, and 100% guaranteed that the girl hated Andrea as much as she hated her. She looked at her rank before making sure to walk back their way. If ever you need a tutor, Andrea, just let me know. Andrea met the fake smile with a fake one of her own. Oh, Julie, thank you. I wouldn't want to eat into the little sleep you already get, 'cause I know how busy you are. But thank you kindly for the offer. The glare from Juliet's blue eyes would have made Andrea shiver if she did not feel too good with herself. Try not to get bogged down helping every riffraff that comes your way, Ryan. Aisling cocked her head and pouted. But what if you asked me for help, Capel? Andrea almost burst out into laughter as Juliet scowled at them. Playing white knight for the weak won't erase your sins, Ryan. Even if you helped 100 Andreas, it would not bring back... Ms. Capel, the professor called out, is something the matter? Juliet's eyes bounced from Aisling to Andrea before she smirked. Oh, nothing, ma'am. Just checking to see if Andrea is coping okay. Ranking 384th made me a little worried for her. Professor Smith frowned among the small amounts of laughter from the class. But Ms. Salem has yet to see her own rank. How could she be upset already? Bless her heart, Andrea had thought. But then she saw Smith's smile turn into a grin and her eyes focused on her in playful mockery. Well, the cat is already out the bag, as they say. How about you step forward, Miss Salem, and vindicate or not Ms. Capel's worry? Andrea would have sooner jump off a volcano, but eventually she figured that she had to suck it up and get this humiliation ritual over with. She approached Professor Smith and looked down at the list on her table. It spoke to the level of self-gaslighting Andrea was prepared to administer when she began at the top of the page, but was soon forced to turn the page over. She found her name at the bottom of the page, saved only by Oscar Patel's ineptitude. Looks like I'll soon be adding your beautiful corpse to my collection, Professor Smith whispered, and Andrea turned to look at her, having expected to see another awkward and goofy smile. But this time, there was no smile, no signs of jovial whimsy that she had come to expect on the face of her chinless homeroom professor. There were only hungry, beady brown eyes that stared at her. Professor Smith broke the tension with a hearty laugh before patting Andrea on the shoulder. It is only November, Miss Salem. You have some time to save yourself. Andrea said nothing as she returned to her seat. Brock's Forge. Fuck me sideways, Devin groaned as he jumped off the building, clearing the width of the busy street down below before landing on the building on the other side. He barely had time to roll through when he heard his opponent say, "Spark of life!" Devin jumped forward and turned midair. "Called a ward!" The fireball struck his force field. Most of the heat deflected, but not the concussive force that blew him back. He turned in time to be able to land expertly on the ledge. For a tall and lanky creature, Devin Johnson was thankful that he was still so agile. That agility came through for him when he had to lean back and let another fireball fly past his face. He turned and broke out into a run on the ledge, hearing his pursuer's footsteps fast approaching behind him. He is fast, Devin thought, but not nearly as fast as me. That was harsh, since someone being as fast as him was a rare thing. Devin took great pride in how his shrouding manifested best in his great speed. That was something that had once been the only thing he had going for him in life, which was made all the more special because of magic. It was that speed that had allowed him to excel in college all those years ago and earn him the rank of being a strong sorcerer. Those were simpler times, he thought, as a smile crept onto his face despite his predicament. Man, what I would not give to go back to the 90s. There was time for reminiscing later. Right now, Devin had to make sure that he was able to get away from this stranger who had decided to hound him. This had once seemed odd to him, how random people would just try to kill each other as often as they tried to begin a conversation. But such was life in this magic world, especially out in the wild. The council had ruled that magical cities and communities were off limits to these kinds of battles, something that had apparently not been such a popular decision at the time, but had brought about a peace not seen in over a century. The task force had been created for that very reason, though, to uphold this new peace. The guard dogs of the council were made to ensure that the worst impulses and natures of magicians and sorcerers were kept in check. But then why are they coming after me? It had taken Devin little effort to notice who it was that had been following him, for he had a nose for such things. Once he did, he realized that there was a decent chance they were at Misty's bar to arrest him. But they had still not told him what for. In their defense, Devin had bolted before they had gotten the chance. He caught sight of the massive warhammer just as he was about to jump onto another building, and was able to spin in time to make sure that it only barely missed him. Unfortunately for Devin, that had taken a little too much focus away from his jump. He quickly saw that he was doomed to land a few feet short of his target. He smashed into the building, breaking through the brick wall to roll into the apartment of an elderly lady who smelled vaguely Eastern European. Devin had a nose for such things. He ignored her screams and instead pulled out a wad of cash to pay for the damages, although what she saw was beyond him. For all he knew, she did not see the 6'2" tall black man before her, but instead a tree thrown through her wall due to a surprise hurricane. "Devin Johnson!" the warhammer wielder shouted at him. She was a tall bulldog of a woman dressed in the tailored suit of black and white. "You are under arrest for the murder of Sia Buthelezi." "Oh, right, that's why." "Honestly? Valid." "I don't know who that is," he lied, controlling the water in the sink with hand signs. Without an incantation, it was never going to do any necessary damage, but it did splash and distract her enough for him to come in and deliver a brutal punch to the gut. Her shrouding had been up, because of course it was, but his speed had made sure that it was as good as a bulletproof vest eating a shotgun. Shell point blank. She was lifted off her feet and slammed into the wall. Devin could hear her partner coming. The man was about 6 seconds away from interfering, which was more than enough time for him to do his damage. He was on her before she could even plant her feet under her again. The woman was ugly to begin with, cursed with a big nose that had been broken before, a mean set of beady and brown eyes, and lips that were more fleshy than full. And now he intended to make her uglier still. She had nice hair, though. Too bad Devin had every intention of turning her full and golden hair crimson when he split her skull open. Okay, so these are agents of the task force. Good to know. This entire time, he had been only partially sure that these two well-dressed individuals were jumping him for professional reasons. He would have been insulted otherwise. His nose had told him that they were doing council work, but their lack of cohesive synergy made this seem so random, like two stock traders all of a sudden decided that they hated him and wanted him dead. He landed a punch to the jaw and then a right that cracked her on the cheek, causing a laceration. Devin's left went up and made contact on her chin with a connection so pure you'd only ever see something like it during a phone call beneath a cell tower. The hit sent her flying through the ceiling head first. The sight was so funny that he almost did not dodge the wave of pure magical energy that had torn a hole through the wall of the apartment. Devin whistled and shook his head at the sight of the man. He was a burly mass of a man, which made his being so fleet of foot all the more surprising. He had hands that were large and gnarled, with tree-trunk legs and barrel-built body. His skin was pale and pasty, flushed with the red of overexertion. He was bald, which just brought more attention to his eyes, a set of burning and intense green eyes that made Devon shiver. "Listen, man," Devon began, but he was not hearing any of it. To nobody's surprise, the man came in for hand-to-hand combat, unwittingly playing into Devon's strengths. Devon ducked underneath the obvious setup right straight, weaving beyond the left hook and sending his knuckles straight into the man's nose, just as his opponent's left fist had passed the center line. Devon's jab had snapped his head back enough for him to send 3 straights into the man's gut. He then took a step back to jump into the air and deliver a scissor kick that had his opponent outside the apartment and sunken down in the hallway before. The warhammer slammed into his back, and Devon cursed as the magical object rammed him through wall after wall after wall until he too was taken out of the apartment, forced to headbutt the paving of the alleyway. He got up in time to see an old homeless man staring at him in awe, a sight that made Devon smile. "Hey, OG, how's it hanging?" And not for the first time in his life, Devon thanked the source for how things had panned out. Had his master not found him and decided to take him in, or worse, sacrificed him, Devon might have turned out like this man. He stretched as the warhammer moved with a mind of its own, returning to the outstretched hand of its master. The weapon had a shorter handle than it ought to have, with a head as big as his own and covered in runes from a faraway land that made no sense in the hands of an American woman. "Neat," he said, rubbing the part of his back it had slammed into, no doubt breaking a rib. "That thing there got a name?" "Your death," she said, all dramatic-like. Devon would have laughed at her had he not seen how serious she was being. He did not wish to embarrass her any more than he already had, and so instead said, "Sha had it coming, you know. The bitch could not leave well enough alone." "What about Hector Villas, huh?" the man asked, standing behind Devon to cut off the other end of the alleyway. "Did he have it coming too? Or what about his student, a young girl by the name of Maria?" Devon raised a bushy eyebrow as he put his afro comb back into his hair. His hair was not nearly as large and proud as it had been when he had attended college, but he still kept an afro worth some affection. Never heard of him. And he actually meant it this time. The man, whose suit was just as immaculately made as his partner's, snapped his fingers and launched a set of pictures at Devon's feet. "What in the hell?" the street bum gasped, and Devon had to close his eyes and mutter a prayer. "Damn, OG, why'd you have to go and do all that? Now these assholes are going to have to kill you." "We don't kill innocents, Johnson," the woman said as she marched toward him. "Not unless we have to, even if they are slightly touched." "Yay!" he exclaimed, pulling out a $100 note from his suit pants. They were olive green instead of the black of his would-be jailers. He had once had a jacket to match and a white shirt, but a stream of fire had sadly put an end to those. "Here you go," he said, slipping the note into the man's hands. "Don't go spending this on anything bad now, OG. I'll know. I got a nose for it. Now get going." The homeless man nodded his head, whispered a grateful thank you, and immediately left the alleyway to join the busy street of New York rush hour. Devon leaned over to pick up the pictures. Some depicted a muscular Mexican man, and others were of a beautiful African woman he had known well. "Shaw was a spy," Devon said. She knew what the consequences of being caught would be, big girl that she was. Nothing personal. "It was to us," the woman said, and Devon could only shake his head at the foolishness on display. "What game do you think this is, woman? Ring around the rosy? You think you can come into our world, fuck around until the streetlights come on, and then go back home like tomorrow is promised?" He laughed hard. "So it is obvious that you're admitting to these crimes," the woman said, sharing a look with her teammate across from her. "And thus, I am sanctioned to kill you if needs be, but I'd prefer to bring you in and gather more information." Devon smirked and shook his head again. "Woman, you don't have it in you to kill me. Never mind bringing me in. This fight has gone on long enough because there are two of you, and I am having fun playing with y'all. It's honestly insulting that they sent two average magicians to come after a strong sorcerer like me. Damn near hurt my feelings when I noticed you and Tubby had bad intentions." The woman began to swing her hammer like a helicopter rotor with such force that it felt like all the air was being sucked out of the alleyway. "There's a reason why they sent the two of us," the burly man said in a gruff and odd-sounding accent. "We're not usually partnered up." Devon ignored the man as he was more concerned with why she'd risk it all on an attack that was so telegraphed. The only logical reason was that she had a trick up her sleeve, and Devon was convinced that he was not going to fuck around to stay and find out. That was until she said, "You think you're pretty fast, don't you?" Devon took a few steps to align himself with the woman's burly partner behind him and grinned. "Surely she ain't about to risk it all to fell lil ol' me," he thought, his hazel eyes laser-focused onto her. "No, this cat is serious, and I like a challenge. If she hits me, she wins. If she misses, her partner is going to get the brunt of it, and I'll kill her before he recovers." "You don't think so?" he asked, and it was the first time he had seen her smile. "Why think when we can find out?" "Oh, Lord, she's got me there." Devon's eyes narrowed as he crouched and got into his running stance. "If you miss, I'll beat you to death. You know that, right?" She did not say a thing and instead threw the weapon with all her might. Devon had to give it to her. The damn thing was fast, but not enough to have landed a killing blow. The warhammer tore through his shrouding and eviscerated his left shoulder in an explosion of blood and bone. But the damage was not enough to stop him as he was able to heal and cut the distance between them in a flash. "What the hell is that?" Devon thought, as the smell of blood that was not his own wafted its way into his nostrils. He stopped and turned to see the big man with a hole in his stomach and a grin on his face. He didn't even have his shroud up? Devon's confusion allowed for the warhammer's return to catch him off guard, returning through the hole it had just made within the burly man's abdomen and almost hitting his head before landing back in the woman's hand. "What the hell is going on?" he snapped at her, and his question only made her grin grow. "Simple. This is an heirloom, and it allows its wielder to access an animus, but for a cost." Devon tried to keep his cool, despite the situation having so drastically turned against him. An animus was the only thing that could have turned a guaranteed victory into a tedious battle. "Okay, and what was that cost?" "The death of a family member," she said, "and he was my cousin." Oh, fuck. From the anvils of sacrifice spring forth the hammers of war. Bless me and curse me, a daughter of Brock. The busy noise of New York and the polluted smell of the city vanished in a sea of rainbows. He smelled iron and fire and heard a buzzing around his ears. Devon stood in a massive forge made of gray cobbled stone that had sprouts of tree roots tearing through the surface. Where the walls of the alleyway had once been, there were now 9 gates of black iron, each leading to a different environment beyond the forge. One looked off the side of a mountain, the air swirling with snow and bone-chilling winds. Another looked out into the stars, as if the forge was made in the center of the moon, and another led to a place of hellfire and brimstone. There was a gate that could only be described as the pearly gates of heaven. Another led to a mine filled with iron and diamond, and a third led to a massive castle of gold and magic. One gate led to a cemetery where a gray woman worked at digging holes, and another was just northern Canada, but ugly. On the one wall of the chamber, that went without any gates, was a massive forge that radiated enough heat to make even him sweat. There stood 3 invisible men with the outline of being short and stout, with shoulders as wide as a doorframe and heads made for men twice their height. The woman stood in front of the forge, seemingly not noticing the heat as she continued to stare and grin at him with a crazy look in her eyes. The blood now dried in a maroon mask over her pale face. Devin took one more look around him to find the trap, but then frowned when he couldn't sniff it out. Impressive, I guess, but I was expecting something more lethal. The woman laughed and then pointed at the invisible men who were now at work. Do not worry yourself too much about that, Devin. These creatures will ensure that you get the lethality that you're looking for. He watched the men begin the process of melting down iron bars with a raised eyebrow. They're smithing? A hammer for me, she said, her grin growing ever more maniacal. A weapon tailor-made to counter and kill you. I say that it'll take them about, let us say 99 seconds. Those words made him laugh like nothing else before as he crouched into his running stance. Then I'll just kill your pale ass dead in the next minute and a half, he said, his ears buzzing with excitement. She got into her own fighting stance, a more down-to-earth approach than Devin's own style, and said, "Try me." She dodged the setup punch and countered the one he had intended to bury in her right flank, blocking it while stepping inside to slam her elbow against the side of his head. He felt his wrist encased in a strong grip as she spun and threw him over her shoulder into the hard and hot floor. Her downward punch made a fist-sized hole in the cobble floor rather than his head as he barely dodged it and spat a splash of water into her eyes. It gave him the time to roll away from her stomp and spin around to smash his shin into her neck, experiencing that familiar feeling of two shrouds connecting. The force hurt her enough to make her lean into his right hook, the beginning of a barrage of punches that would have been the death of her had he not felt a stinging pain in his hand. It was that pain that had caused him to whiff his seventh hook. "Grounded!" she snapped, and a section of the cobble floor shot upward to uppercut his chin. While his toes were an inch from the ground, the woman concentrated her shroud around a punch that tore through the walls she had made. Soon she had embedded her fist into his abdomen, sending him bouncing and slamming into the wall. Devin did not have the time to ruminate over how clever that attack pattern had been, for he had just wasted a good number of seconds getting his ass kicked instead of beating her to death. He launched himself off the wall with broken ribs and all. He would have time to waste his reserves healing later, and thought she was on the defensive when she leapt onto her back foot. Devin was nearly caught off guard again when she used that to push herself to meet him instead. She's game breed for sure, Devin thought as he dodged her right straight to try and deliver a knee to the gut that was blocked. No wonder they gave her the hammer instead of the Neanderthal. The woman changed levels to wrap her arms around the leg he had just tried to knee her with, and Devin cursed. "Bitch! Are we hugging or—" She used the level change to fireman carry him and launched herself into the ceiling. Devin was slammed between her shoulders and the hard stone above, and he heard another crack of ribs. "Spark of life! Ignite this light!" he shouted, engulfing both of them in a wave of flame that made her let go of him with a scream that matched his own. Devin recovered the faster between the two, tapping into his magic reserves to point a gun and fire his Sicket respiratio, a form of telekinesis that manifested in a bullet when his fingers were shaped like a gun. That was, at the very least, the plan. But that pain from earlier occurred again. This time, it felt like he had been shot in the neck. Devin was able to fire the bullet despite this, but the aim had been so far off that he had missed by a mile, just in time to land on his feet and try again. "Force of light!" he shouted, making sure that this time there would be a little mustard behind it, and the bullet tore through her shrouding and burrowed its way into her left eye. She barely seemed to register it as she returned with an attack of her own. Spark of life. He was injured, but not so much that he could not dodge the attack and move to finish her off. The pain returned and did so with a vengeance, forcing him to grit his teeth as his eye felt like it was about to burst out of his head. However, this time he had not been all that surprised by it and continued onward. The distraction did, however, hand her the initiative, and so the woman crouched and sent an uppercut his way before he could close the gap. Devin had just about moved his head out of the way from the oddly performed attack, but he had found out too late that she had not been delivering an uppercut. Instead, he had swung something in her hand. This discovery came by way of his jaw shattering as an invisible hammer sent him flying into the air. He felt himself bounce several times against the hard cobble floor, forming spider webs wherever he landed. At the same time, there was an explosion of rock and brimstone behind him. What the fuck was that? Devin looked to see her charging at him, her arm rising as if prepared to bludgeon him to death. Relax, he told himself as he rolled back onto his feet, his useless mandible unable to close his mouth to stop the blood and drool from flowing down his chin. Just don't get hit. The hammer came back to crack him upside his head, and Devin knew then that it was over. She finished off his cheekbone with a hell of a blow that made him spit out his teeth. To ensure that Devin could not use his speed to get out of this, she had delivered the next attack to his right knee, shattering his patella, forcing his now disconnected tibia to tear through muscle and pop out of his skin. He did not have anything left in him to ask her to stop by using his words, and so he held out his hands instead, in a sign of surrender. She used that as an opportunity to shatter his left wrist and to break a few fingers on his right hand. Her last attack came down like a meteorite, destroying his groin, shattering his pelvis bone, and flattening everything else in the vicinity. Devin did not know what he looked like, probably like a poorly packaged sausage thrown into a pool of blood, but he knew what she looked like, and it was terrifying. The woman was breathing heavily as she stood over him, her one eye gone and her entire face covered in blood anew. Her hammer shimmered into reality and looked about the same as it had before, but this time it had an invisibility feature to it and was dripping like a wall splashed with paint, if the paint was his blood. He felt himself being picked up and carried, and the heat somehow got even worse with each step she took. "You need time to heal and come to your senses," she told him, in a tone that should have been jubilant and triumphant, but was instead filled with nothing. Devin was insulted once more. "I will be back in 15 days to see if you're more cooperative." Devin could not keep his head up to see where they were going, but he did hear a gate sliding open and smelled what could only have been described as hell. Oh no, please no. He would have spoken then and there had she asked. Devin would have told her of the Phoenician, of his plans, of the attack meant to come, everything. He would have told her everything. But instead, he felt himself fall a great distance and land painfully on a patch of brimstone made of black mixed with glowing red. He turned to look out at the horizon before him, and the endlessness of it terrified him. The environment had a landscape of fiery mountains made of red flesh covered in veins that pulsed. Dripping from the tops of these mountains were rivers of lava and blood that rolled down onto the plains of brimstone that were populated by demons. These mindless creatures were made of cinder and embers and moved around aimlessly like zombies. He tried to heal himself in time to be able to fight back when one of the demons stopped their zombie-like walk to turn to look at him and slowly hobbled toward Devin. But he had nothing left to save himself. He started to moan his protests the nearer it came and was crying by the time the thing crouched down to get a better look at him. It slowly opened its mouth and spoke in a voice as if a desert had come to life in a language that he did not know. Devin could only reply with panicked mumblings. It reached out to touch him, and when it touched his face, his entire body began to burn. For every hour of the next 15 days, the burning never stopped. Brain invaders or Bob's Burgers. "Andy!" Aisling called her name for the 15th time that day. "You can't go wasting your life away over one bad grade." Andrea paused Bob's Burgers long enough to peer her head out the covers and say, "I scored a 3 in Bodily Magic, Aisling." She had expected a reaction, but her friend was a good actress. Andrea was prepared to give her that much. "Okay, not ideal, but..." It was the highest I scored for any of the practical modules. This time, not even Aisling could hide the wince, and Andrea felt vindicated enough to throw the covers over her head and resuming her comfort show. Exactly. So forgive me if I want live what little remains of my life watching this beautiful show about a family. Oh, stop acting the maggot, Andrea. I know what Bob's Burgers is about. Aisling sounded exasperated. Don't mean you should wallow away in your room, Andy. I'm leaving in a few days, and I want to spend some time with you, Z and Val. That was enough to get her to pop her head out again. Oh, you want to spend some time with me? Aisling rolled her beautiful blue eyes. Including Zoya and Valerie, yes. But me specifically? Oh, fuck off, she said, throwing a pillow at Andrea. Get out of that bed or else I'll throw you out the window. Andrea turned over and reached out a hand to grab onto Aisling's sleeve. You promise? Aisling picked up a screaming Andrea like she was a toddler and carried her all the way to the first-year showers at the end of their hallway. It was a massive bathroom that looked like it was part of a prison whose warden was a clean freak and loved sun-yellow tiles everywhere. A 15-minute shower and lost wrestling match later, Andrea stood outside of their dormitory, wearing a pair of black tights underneath a black skirt, her black boots, a white t-shirt, and a black denim jacket. A certain color spoke to her on that day. You look like you're at a funeral, Zoya commented, who herself looked like she had not had much sleep. Andrea sighed. I'm preemptively mourning for myself, Z, since I know that y'all won't do it. You're right there, Andy. Got better things to do. Valerie, Aisling snapped, and the girl had the decency to sigh and say, I meant to say that we've got better things to do, like arranging the funeral. Andrea hated edgy humor. It was the comedy of teenage boys, as she often referred to it as, but this one got her good. LOLO! Thomas' voice caused them to turn around. He was dressed in white sneakers beneath a navy blue Adidas tracksuit with a white shirt tucked in and held down by a small silver chain. On his head was a black beanie that did not fit and a large smile on his face. You lot are looking good. The film starts in an hour, so you ready to go? By his side were two boys dressed in similar wear to him. Hey, Thomas, Aisling waved. Be good and introduce your friends. I know who he is. Andrea turned and smiled, cutting Thomas off. Killed anyone lately, Teddy? The large boy grinned. He himself dressed in a black Nike tracksuit set and wearing a Chicago Bulls cap on his round head. Long time, yeah, you're looking peng as usual, he said as he came in for a hug. Didn't know you knew Tommy, though. Where from? Andrea shrugged. He's part of my class, unfortunately. Teddy raised an eyebrow at Thomas and grinned. You met your missus during ABC's blood? No wonder your scores were so shit. Fuck off, Thomas said, before socking him in the shoulder and turning to introduce them to the only person there who was a stranger to her. Everybody, meet Jeffrey. Jeff, meet everybody. Jeff was the tallest among them, a pale boy with a face made pink by a bout of acne and a chin covered by a ginger goatee. He was decked out in a black beanie over his tousled auburn hair, Nike jersey, some denim shorts with Converse sneakers, and shin-length white Nike socks. Jeff raised his hand in an awkward wave. Hello there. There were a chorus of greetings and further introductions before they began to head toward the cabbage carts. The walk there was just as filled with people as it had been on the day she had walked it with Julian by her side. Bundy was joking earlier about the Mrs. comment. Thomas's voice pulled her out of her reminiscing session. Andrea feigned a frown. Really now, and this whole time I thought we were fixing to get married, silly me. Thomas laughed. If we're both single at age 50, maybe. Till then, in your dreams, Salem. What are you doing hanging out with this loser anyway, Teddy? She asked, pointing a thumb at Thomas. He's from my ends, Teddy responded with a shrug. I got picked up back in year 10, and Tommy was a year below me then. Some kid I'd seen running around, getting up to no good. Didn't really know him that well, though. Ran into him here. thought I should take him under my wing to show him the ropes. The rest is history, as they say. I'd have been better off without you, Tommy muttered. Being under Teddy's wing meant going on a bit of a bender during orientation week. Had us acting like a bunch of flipping twits. Teddy and Jeff both burst out into laughter at the reminder. "This clown! Don't you see?" Jeff said, throwing an arm over Thomas's shoulders. "We were doing you a favor, bruv. This school eats people up and spits them out, yeah. We just wanted to make sure that if it happened, you went out with at least some good memories. You get me?" That made Andrea's heart skip a beat, so much so that Aisling noticed and gave her a pretty smile to reassure her. "Rankings dropped," Jeff said, grinning back toward the rest of them. "Anybody here on the chopping block, then?" Zoya shoved an elbow into Valerie's side to get her to stop laughing. "I don't want to think about school, fam," Thomas said with an exaggerated yawn. "Not like you two score highly anyway to be talking." "Come on, then," Valerie prodded. "Since you were asking, tell us then, Jeff. How well did you do?" Teddy snickered like a vaudevillian as Jeff sheepishly rubbed at the back of his long neck. "Okay, before I tell you..." They booed his attempts to sell them excuses and chanted that he tell them immediately. "Drop the Jeff files," Aisling demanded, earning a chorus of laughter. Fine, he said, waving away their chants. "I scored a strong pass, 5.1. Not my best, but I've definitely done worse." Zoya began to blush as Thomas and Teddy laughed, earning an eye roll from Valerie. "I saw your grades, Tommy lad. You barely scored .7 more than that, so let's keep ourselves humble now. Yeah?" Teddy was the only one laughing now, until Tommy asked him what his score was. "Don't matter." "Eh?" Tommy frowned and took a step back. "Is this you? Laughing when you know that you yourself are a fraud?" They argued some more until they reached the cabbage cart, where Andrea waved at Mad Maddie before they were separated by their choice of seat. Teddy joined Aisling, leaving Jeff to speak to Valerie and Zoya both from his seat behind them. Thomas settled himself next to her and had a sheepish smile plastered on his face. "Sorry about earlier, yeah. My friends tend to chat shit sometimes. I don't think they know how to turn it off." Andrea tried to play nonchalant, but in truth, she wanted to run back inside and hide. "No apologies needed, bruv. It's only natural that they'd want to talk about grades and rankings since they just came out." "True," Tommy conceded, and they said nothing for a while as they went down the hill. "You leaving before or after the end-of-term party?" he asked, and Andrea had to think about it a moment. "I didn't go to the last one." "I'm leaving Monday. When's the party?" "Saturday," Thomas said with a grin. "So you lot are definitely going then." "Oh? Is that an order? From a man who goes on benders before school begins?" Andrea shook her head and tisked at him. "Maybe if y'all had stayed in and been good boys, you'd have gotten a better grade than 5.8. Thomas laughed loudly. "Oh, so you have jokes? Okay, so you must have been out and about getting sloshed on the daily then." Andrea gasped before turning her back toward him. "Woo, I can't believe you said that." "Oh, come on, I'm sorry, Andy." She glanced over her shoulder before saying, "Are you really?" He nodded his head and frowned at her extended hand. "And what is this?" "You said that you're really sorry. Prove it." Thomas's frown deepened until he slapped her palm with his own. "Good game." She snorted and rubbed her index and thumb finger together. "I'm talking about moolah, bruh. Put your money where your mouth is." Thomas smacked his lips and shook his head in disappointment. "The day I give a woman money is the day I am married, my friend. So where's the ring?" Andrea laughed. "Would that not be the woman's question, Tommy? And so, say I needed $5 from you, do we have to drive on down to Las Vegas to find ourselves an Elvis? Let's do this, yeah. You buy my snacks and I'll buy your ticket. Deal?" Andrea rolled her eyes at the offer. "You must think I'm an idiot. A ticket has a limit to its price. Snacks do not. Flip the offer if you're about it for real." He laughed and shook her hand. Andrea had been surprised to hear that the place had a movie theater, but her surprise made no sense when you really thought about it. It's a city, doofus. It was an odd-fashioned cinema designed with velvet, red shag carpet floors and walls, with a set of ticket booths in the corner aligned underneath movie posters and a massive concession stand in the middle of the cinema. All 4 walls had several doors leading to their own theater. They very quickly reached the front of a very small queue. There were 2 families and a handful of couples present. When asked which movie they wished to watch, everyone except Zoya voiced their opinion. They left it up to a coin toss and then erupted into cursing when it was discovered that Teddy's coin was magically rigged. They decided to go for the one furthest one to them called Brain Invaders 4: Return of the Cerebellum. The movie was terrible, and not because none of them watched the first 3 movies, but the theater being empty meant that they got to talk as much shit about it as they wanted, and so that made the experience a lot more enjoyable. Ice cream? Teddy suggested, and Jeff bent over to stare at his large stomach as he said, "Of course." Andrea frowned and turned to say something to Zoya, but stopped when she noticed the frown on her face. "Z," Andrea muttered, startling her out of her mind. "You good?" Her big brown eyes seemed sad for a moment before a small smile broke through that made Andrea's heart ache to see. "Oh, it's nothing." Andrea leaned over to bump Zoya's shoulder with her own, having to lean over a little due to their height difference. "Hey, you can tell me anything. Maybe—" A thick eyebrow rose. "Maybe." "Yeah," Andrea said, her shoulders going up and down. "If what you tell me can get me any monetary gain or clout, best believe that it's over for you. Sorry, not sorry." Zoya laughed. "Glad to know that our friendship has a price tag." "And a tag on TikTok followers, Z. Don't forget the clout," she said before throwing an arm over her shoulders. "But this time, I'll make an exception, since we're friends." She looked up at Andrea and sighed. My parents were not happy about me coming here, you know. They wanted me to go to a good school and live a normal and good life, even if it is shorter and less magical." "And you fought for this?" Zoya shrugged off her arm. "I didn't fight, Andy, I left. And now I might die for it. All because I wanted to have the freedom to live." Andrea did not know that. She knew that her family had been heavily against her coming here, and Andrea would not have been surprised. What family would willingly throw their only daughter into what was essentially the Hunger Games with pop quizzes? Andrea had even known that she had found a master to teach her some things before being enrolled here, but this bit of information was new. "Oh, so where are you spending the break?" Andrea regretted the question immediately when it seemed that Zoya was about to break out and cry, but she instead closed her eyes and looked away. "Andy, what would you do if you made the bottom 40 at the end of the year?" Andrea paused and thought about it for a moment before she shook her head. "I don't know, Z." She looked up at Andrea with an expression that made her shiver a little, an intensity she had never seen before. "What would you be prepared to do to ensure that you're not?" Andrea did not know how to answer that as much as the prior question, but thought that she would have to give this one a go. "I'll just have to pull myself up by my bootstraps," as some of the old people back home would say, "but I have no other choice but to Zoya." The answer did not seem to satisfy Zoya, and Andrea could not blame her. Zoya's score was far better than Andrea's, but everyone and their mama scored higher than her. Her score was still not good, and so Zoya was in danger of falling into the bottom 10% like her. Even I wouldn't buy my bullshit, she thought, and I'm the one selling here. "But I'll have you," she said, "and Tommy, and Aisling, and, well, I was about to say Valerie, but—" Zoya laughed and squeezed her hand. "Good save. I don't think she'd piss on you if you were on fire." "Keep me away from any fires then." "Hey," Andrea said, an idea just recently popped into her head. "It won't make up for being home, but if you want, you can spend the break hanging out with me. I'd love to show you around New Orleans. Show you Londoners what a real city looks like." The tears threatened to break out again, but Zoya cut them off at the pass by wiping her eyes. "I'd love to." Zoya got her chocolate mint ice cream as a thank you, and Andrea had to admit that it was a better afternoon spent than laying in bed watching Bob's Burgers. The plot thickens. "Well," Gavin said as he extinguished his cigarette against his palm, healing the small wound just as the butt dropped to the ground. "You certainly did a number on him." The man the two of them were staring at was, to put it frankly, in a fucked-up state. His hair was gray from ash and stress and stuck out like exposed copper wiring. His skin belonged to a man who had been caught in an explosion, charred and blackened everywhere with spots of red, exposed flesh. It was the job of a few torn and tattered rags to keep his modesty. The smell was horrid. Gavin had to force the bile back down the first time he had entered the room to see their victim. The man's eyes were wild and frantic, one smaller than the other due to a broken orbital bone that had not healed properly. His nose had been flattened and ruined to the extent that Gavin was left to wonder how it was that he was breathing right now. I mean, the damn thing looks like a stepped-on potato. He'd been a tall man once, but Gavin could not get the full extent of him while he sat in the corner, cowering in fear from them, hunched over and shaking like a terrified dog. "It's what he gets," Emily told him, pulling out a cigarette of her own and snapping her fingers to light it. "The bastard was tough, so I saw no other way than to put Valdemar down." Gavin would have put a comforting hand on her shoulder if it was just about anyone else, but he knew that Emily Ford was the last woman who'd need it. "He knew the possibility was up in the air when you two got put together," Gavin said, shaking his head. "He was a better man than me. I tell you what, I'd have sooner let this piece of shit go than let you tear a hole through me." She took a deep inhale and blew the smoke into the man's face, causing him to scream in such terror that Emily had to kick him to get him to stop. "That's why you're half the man that he was, Gavin. With the hole you put in him. We're about the same amount of man now, Ford. How the fuck are we going to get anything out of him when he is in this state?" "Leave that to me," she muttered before handing him the cigarette and kneeling to look the creature in the eye. "Devin?" The man had been muttering some nonsense the whole time, and Gavin had tried to ignore him. It was the sort of drivel that made Gavin's teeth ache. It's always the crazies. "If he keeps on with this prattle, I'll fucking end him myself," he warned her, and she ignored him as she placed a firm hand on his shoulder. "Devin, are you there?" The frantic eyes had seemed glossy and out of it before, but focused once he locked onto Emily's ugly face. The screaming resumed until Gavin slapped him across the face. "And if he screams again—" "Yes, yes!" Emily snapped. "You'll end him. I fucking got it. Now shut up or I'll leave you where I left him." Devin placed his own hand on his bruised cheek. His hand was a broken thing that looked like it belonged on the body of the oldest person in the country's most senile old age home. "Devin Jackson? Is your name Devin Jackson?" J. Johnson. My name is Devin Johnson." "Good." Emily's meaty lips parted in a wet smile. "Good, Devin. Listen, you don't want to go back to hell— Please," he screamed, attempting to stand but crumbling due to his one shattered leg, forcing him to grab onto Emily's suit for support. "I don't want to go back. Please, I'll do whatever you want." She grinned up toward Gavin. "See?" He rolled his green eyes but said nothing as he folded his arms. He had to give it to her, for all intents and purposes. The man's spirit had been broken. Their report had told of a strong magician who was great at shrouding and physical combat, with an exceptional sense of self and confidence in his abilities that were bordering on the delusional. Emily told him a different story, however. According to her post-battle report, the man was generous and cocky, but never seemed to be arrogant or delusional. Her ability to break targets was why she had to be called in, since they needed information, and needed it as soon as possible. Reports had been coming in that brought more and more suspicion and panic. There were whispers of congregations spawning everywhere for worshippers to sneak away to, which was always the case in truth, but the numbers had begun to rise to the downright comical. The number of deaths had sharply risen too, but the types of deaths occurring in magical cities and towns were what had truly set off the alarms. Gavin knew that they were well and truly in for it when some of those bodies turned up with ritualistic mutilations. Men and women were killed together in loving embrace, always with the man's member still inside of her. There was one case of a boy of 17, a morbidly obese creature, having had his throat slit and his stomach removed and placed on a plate with a fork and knife. He was so large that he had not left his bed in years. Revenge killings were shooting through the roof among old clans and family members in Scotland, over gripes long thought buried, and suicides due to gambling addictions were at a 50-year high. Separately, these things might have drawn no attention, but together they served as signs of old and bad habits re-emerging. Their world was always one filled with creative and disturbing acts of violence. It was for that very reason why the task force had been created, to hunt down and catch those sorts of people. But what he was seeing now was beyond his wildest expectations. Devin, this man right here is our friend. If he likes you and you end up making him happy, he will make sure you never go to hell again, understand? Devin whimpered as he nodded his head, his terrified eyes glancing at him before bolting back to Emily's ugly mug. Yes, I understand. Emily patted him on the head before standing up. She was of such a height that she almost looked him eye to eye, and he stood at 6 feet tall. He's all yours. There was awkward silence between the two before Gavin finally frowned as he scratched at his stubble. Well, what? He gestured for her to leave the room. The abandoned building had not been her first place of choice for dropping off their target, but Gavin had insisted that those in the precinct could not be trusted and gave her the directions to drop him off here. Emily had laughed at him for that until she saw how serious he was being and laughed all the harder. But eventually, she gave in, though she eyed him with great suspicion, and the two met at this abandoned apartment building outside of the small town of Cold Spring. It was a wonder that she showed up at all, he noted, and more so without that damned hammer of hers. Gavin sighed after she folded her arms and decided that he'd just go forward with it anyway. There'll be time to convince her later. Hey there, buddy! The man watched his every moment as Gavin approached slowly and kneeled to look him in the eyes. I'm Gavin Valentine, but you can call me Gavin if you want. He felt stupid talking to a grown man like he was a child, but Gavin sensed that he had to approach this with the level of care this broken man needed. Devin's eyes glanced at Emily, who nodded her approval. Hello, Gavin. Jesus, they have him acting like a beaten dog. Look, Dev, can I call you Dev? He again sought permission before nodding his head. Dev, we have ourselves a little problem. A couple of people who promise not to gather and pray in large numbers together are doing exactly that. Do you know what sorts of people I'm talking about? Devin's lips puckered, and the sight of it made Gavin violently ill, but he was able to keep his composure, because it was what the moment called for. Look, man, I'll tell you what I know. This is about that lady, right? Well, the meat man she was spying on, I only know him as the Phoenician. He came looking for me one day, said he could use a man like me. Now we're getting somewhere. The Phoenician? That is a very cool name. And why'd he come looking for you? The third instance of him looking toward Emily brought about a legendary exercise in restraint on Gavin's part. Come on, bud, you can tell me. I'm going to take you now away from her. Devin's eyes grew 3 sizes as he leaned forward. You promise? Gavin nodded his head. But only if you tell me what I want to know. I had a student, he said, in a voice more clear than Gavin had ever heard from him before. A girl who showed great potential. I knew of the Phoenician from my master who worshipped the source. I never really took much to the religion to begin with, but focus, Gavin said, snapping his fingers to gain back his attention. And slow down. Why did you mention your student? Devin tried to swallow, but his throat was dry and it only made him have a coughing fit. Gavin and Emily both waited patiently for the breakthrough they had been chasing for months as their victim coughed his lungs up. In a rasping voice, Devin said he wanted her to infiltrate Camelot. What for? Emily asked, beating him to the punch. Terror, Devin muttered. I don't know how, but he wants to sow terror. Gavin cocked his head and shared a look with Emily before smiling and looking back at Devin. Why Camelot? Isn't that the school where Nerva is headmaster? And his sister, Emily chuckled. Does this Phoenician have a death wish? Devin shook his head. I said the same. But he said he has a plan. I didn't want my student involved in a lost cause, but he said he had a plan to pull them away, to distract them. Gavin stood up and folded his arms, his mind working overtime to think of what sort of endgame a man like this would have. A religious extremist? In this day and age. Does he worship the source? Gavin asked, more for himself than for the rambling mess of a man on the ground before him. Or is there a particular part of the source that has itself balls deep in him? Devin shook his head like he was chasing away a bee. No, sir. He did not seem all that religious, no more than me anyway. He used to be, according to him, but he spoke like one of those sorcerer supremacists, you know. He'd ramble on and on about how magic shouldn't go to weak bloodlines, and we shouldn't let the weak into our schools and stuff. Says a lot about the world that this is good news, Emily said, and Gavin could not help but agree. Could all those ritualistic murders be a coincidence then? Where is the Phoenician now? She asked him, and the frantic fear came back immediately when he looked back at her. What does he look like? Where and when did you guys meet? When is the attack scheduled to happen? Devin began to shiver the more she spoke, and Gavin had to hold out a hand to stop her before the man pissed himself. I think he has had enough, Emily. She sneered at him. Enough? Gavin, you heard him, right? There's going to be a terrorist attack at Camelot. We need to get this information out of him and report everything to the Baron, and we need to do it with a swiftness. Gavin had pulled out a cigarette during her tirade and had lit it and taken his first inhale by the time that she was done. Slow down now, we don't have to do all that. Not yet, anyway. Her eyebrow raised, the one above the eye patch she was wearing. You don't think the attack is due to happen soon? He shrugged and pointed at the man currently shivering in a pool of his own piss. Could be. He'll be of little use to us today, Ford. The man is a raving mess. Leave him with me and... No. Emily's voice was as cold as the weather outside, and it was looking like snow was due to come down on them. I've played along with your games until now, Gavin, but I'm starting to feel like you're hiding something from me. Your behavior is off. He tried to laugh away her words, but immediately stopped once he saw the hammer manifest out of nowhere. The sight of the object made Devin scream in terror and forced him to drag his broken body away into the furthest corner of the decrepit room. Hey now! Gavin held his hands up in surrender. No need to get violent. Emily rested the weapon upon her shoulder, her other hand firmly placed on her hip. Explain yourself and know that if you lie and say anything about not trusting anyone in the precinct again, I'll beat the hell out of you. If anyone could be a spy for the enemy, then it damn well could be you too. And with the way that you're acting. Gavin was not sure that she could. Beat the hell out of him, that is, since his senses told him that her reserves were average, if that. But he had seen her in action enough times to know that she was a dog, in every sense of the word. Emily was the kind of mutt who you could beat and kick all you wished. They were going to latch on and hold on for all they were worth, growling and drooling the whole way. And the visual of Devon, who once could have beaten a guy like Gavin pretty easily, did not instill much confidence in him that she was bluffing. Gavin eyed the weapon and quickly resolved that he'd rather do anything else than get hit by that thing. He sighed and said, "Emily, this is your last chance to do the right thing. Don't do this." Emily's beady brown eye narrowed, and Gavin could feel that the situation was deteriorating very quickly. "You can't truly believe that I'm a spy for these supremacist nut jobs." She seemed to ponder the possibility before shrugging. "Okay, then explain why we're here and not in the precinct again." Gavin tried to laugh away her question. "We know that he killed Sia, right? Who is to say that she wasn't sold out, huh? You heard him. Infiltration is a weapon they use. Isn't it reasonable to assume that they've done the same to the precinct like they did the college? I think that they have. That's why I brought us out here. Do you think a fool like this would have thought it through and discovered Sia's identity on his own?" Those words made her hesitate enough to lose the fire in her eye. Amelia sighed. "That is a fair assessment. I don't like the idea, but there's a chance." His heartbeat returned to normal as he finally got the chance to exhale the smoke he had been holding. "Good," he coughed. "Glad we've come to our senses." She cocked her head and her eye narrowed again. "You didn't know about the infiltration thing until now, though?" Fuck. Gavin's hesitation was all a trigger-happy fool like Emily Ford needed, and the hammer had been cocked back to cave his head in. Her swing, however, was cut short by a vice-like grip wrapping itself around her wrist. "What the—" "You're not as good a liar as I thought you would be, Mr. Valentine," Boudica Nerva said, the only woman Gavin knew who was of a similar height to Emily. Emily landed several punches that bounced off her like a tennis ball against a wall. Meanwhile, Boudica's eyes focused upon the hammer. She pulled Emily's arm down to get a better look at it before nodding her head. "Do you know that the rune inscriptions tell of what this warhammer can do? Invisibility is a useful tool." It was after the sixth punch bouncing off Boudica's cheek that the message finally got through Emily's thick skull enough to get her to stop. I did not... Gavin? Who the hell... "Do not worry," she told Emily calmly. "I will not kill you. But I do request that you focus all of your magical reserve into guarding your stomach. I plan on knocking you out and holding you hostage for some time." Emily never got to finish her sentence as the wall behind her tore apart and her body vanished. The only sign of what had happened was Boudica standing in a stance indicating that she had just thrown a punch. "She's dead," he muttered, and Boudica shook her head. "Oh my, Mr. Valentine, do give me and my precision much more credit than that. I concentrated the exact amount of magic into my fist as needed to tear through her shroud and knock her out. No more and no less." He looked at the massive hole in the apartment wall and shook his head. "She's dead." Boudica ignored him as she walked toward Devon Johnson. "Mr. Johnson, you are free to go, but only after answering one final question." He nodded his head vehemently, and Gavin was surprised that Boudica allowed that pitiful creature to touch her leg. "Anything! Anything!" Boudica smiled at him. "Good boy. When will the attack occur?" "On the final Saturday before the term break." She patted his head and snapped her fingers, opening a dark portal beneath him that swallowed Devon Johnson whole. "Where'd he go?" Gavin asked, and she pointed toward the ground. "The ground floor of this building. Relax. I would not kill a man after promising him freedom, Mr. Valentine. I am a woman of my word, after all." Gavin frowned at her, and the look made her laugh. "Okay, I am a woman of my word sometimes." He followed after her as she moved to exit the room. "How much of that did you hear?" Boudica glanced toward him. "Enough. Why?" Her eyes focusing in on him made him uncomfortable, and he hated how much he was unable to hold the gaze. The Phoenician is apparently gunning for your siblings and their school. My siblings will be fine, Boudica said with a wave of her hand. She snapped her fingers to open a portal for them to enter, and Gavin felt like he had been thrown into a washing machine and spat back out. He hunched over and feared that he was about to throw up. My brood of a brother and his favorite sister will overcome this trap, she said calmly. My father made certain that they were born strong. They were outside now on the sidewalk a few feet away from where a hobbling Devin Johnson was crying tears of joy. A giant man in a suit 2 sizes too small for him opened a door to a Mercedes for her. She said something to him in German, and he pointed to the body of an unconscious Emily in the front seat. I should take this information to the Baron, Gavin said, or do I pay you good money to work for me or for my brother? Boudica tut-tutted. No, Mr. Valentine, you're in my employ to serve me, listen and report, that is all. But she raised her hand and sighed. I saw my sister recently. The witch is still as annoying as she is beautiful. I had made a promise to report what I find out to her. Your precious Baron will find out soon enough, rest assured. Boudica glanced toward the crazed man screaming and whooping like a crackhead and smiled. And as I've said, Mr. Valentine, I am a woman of my word, after all. A party for the ages. Mado had only been in this lecture hall for 15 minutes, and he was already sure of one thing. He hated most of the people here with all of his heart. Oh, Liam whispered. Looks like somebody isn't happy with what he's hearing. He rolled his eyes and folded his arms, leaning against the wall of the lecture room where they had all gathered. This plan, it's the plan, Olivia snapped. The girl was built like a warthog and looked like a disfigured one at that. He had come to like Liam begrudgingly over the last few weeks of the term. Liam would not shut up about anything he liked, that much was true. But Liam kept him company and allowed him to practice his English, so that made up for all the yapping he did. He was also kind, and sometimes, when the stars aligned, he was even funny. But Mado was starting to wonder if his friendship was worth the cancer known as Olivia Baker, Liam's cancerous twin sister. He had spent perhaps 5 hours of his life sharing the same air as her, and had enjoyed maybe 30 seconds of it. She was hateful, felt everything warranted her opinion, laughed like a dying baboon, and on top of that, was a bigot. The only thing stopping him from beating her to death was his friendship with Liam, and if Liam brought up Bob Dylan one more time, not even that would save her from Mado. Calm yourself, he thought. You have a mission. You can think about killing Olivia later. The plan is simple, the girl with the bright blue eyes said. She was pretty, with a long face and black hair tied back into a ponytail. We kill the lights and start attacking. What would have been the point of learning the passive night vision spell otherwise? Marcus ran his hands through his auburn hair and groaned. Fuck that plan. That's a cowardly plan. Olivia rolled her eyes. Thank you, Marcus. We heard you the first gosh darn time. The only things Mado had in common with Marcus were that they both, seemingly, hated Olivia, and that they were both tall. Our role is to cause chaos. The bright blue-eyed girl snarled at him. I'm sorry that it won't get you into Valhalla, but it's the role we've been given. Then swap me, Salim suggested. I've had my eyes set on the warehouse raid for months now. There are tools and weapons worth a fortune just waiting for us to take, but instead, I have to go and kill some kids I couldn't give a shit about. Salim was his classmate who had impressed Mado with his mastery over numbers and his advanced knowledge on spellcasting. Everything else about Salim had made Mado hate him. He liked to tease him, believing that Mado's English was not good enough to know that he was constantly talking shit about him. He was a short boy, lean in build with hairy arms, with short black hair and sad brown eyes. Despite being so small, Salim walked around as if he owned the world. It was that reason why Mado wanted to shatter his cleft jaw with a punch, first chance he got. Calm yourself, Mado thought. Worry about the mission. You can kill Salim later. The day has come in which I must kill thyself, George's baritone voice rang out, for I find myself in agreement with our greedy little friend. Call me little again, Salim growled, and I'll make you eat your intestines. You wannabe thespian. George whimpered and spun into a chair, his arm draped dramatically over his forehead. Wannabe? Is that how you speak to a respected teammate, Salim? Calm yourself, Mado. You can kill George later. George was a thin white boy who desired nothing more than to be the center of attention at all times. He had a square jaw that Mado could not keep his eyes off of, and a set of high cheekbones that lay beneath big brown eyes that Mado believed would look much better if they were forced shut forever. Listen up, the blue-eyed girl said. If we're not on the same page, this plan will go tits up and go tits up fast. So a lot of you are going to have to get over whatever's got your panties in a twist. Mado did not know accents very well to tell where someone was from, but he did know enough to detect that she was not from this land, unlike Marcus, Justin, JJ, and Rebecca. She turned and sighed when she saw Liam raise his hand. Liam, this is not a lecture. You do not have to raise your hand. If you say so, Jules, he said as he pulled his arm down. I get that we're Team Chaos and all, but surely there would be a way to cause chaos that won't get us killed immediately. We only number, 75? 100 maybe? Julia shrugged and waved away his complaint. We're hitting the first years, alongside Vicky, Bernie, and Lucky's teams. Outside of Manfred Klein and some of the top 10, I do not see any reason why we'd be in trouble. Between the 4 teams, we have 25 of the top 50 ranks among us, and another 15 are with Jade and Diveshin hitting the warehouse. Which is another thing that's got me confused. Liam did not hide the look of disgust on his face. I got ranked half-assing it because I was told where to keep a low profile. Yet some of y'all done got top 25 rankings. Maybe we are top 25 even when we half-ass it? Nadine Hawthorne laughed. Have you ever thought of that? It must suck to suck, Baker. If we're to make chaos, then why does it matter the way we attack? Mado asked, surprising himself with how sure he sounded. Julia raised an eyebrow at him, and for a moment he believed it was because she did not understand him. I'm sorry, but what is your name again? Mado gritted his teeth and tried his best to ignore Olivia's snickering. Calm yourself. Mado, he said plainly, and the name brought recognition to her eyes. Hartono's student. Yes, I remember you now. What was your question again? He's asking why we need to do our attack all sneaky-like. Liam spoke on his behalf, and it was another reminder of why he might be Mado's only friend. If we're here to sow in chaos, allow us to hit him how we want to hit him. Marcus clapped his large hands together. Hooray, the man who can barely speak English is making more sense than you, Jules. Give the signal and let loose the hogs of war. Dogs, George snapped. It is dogs of war, you inbred cretin. Marcus glared at George with intense gray eyes. Julia, I'll speak to you because I never want to sully myself by communicating with this homo. Tell him, should he dare speak to me again, I'll kill him where he stands. Hey now, let's not use strong words like that, huh? Justin suggested, attempting to play the role of peacemaker, and that marked him down for censure in Mado's book. Enough, Julia snapped. Her anger was accompanied by her aura emerging. The show of force was enough to instill some semblance of quiet once more. Each team has their section. We will meet back here tomorrow afternoon and go together to the function. Is that understood? Her eyes darted to every member of the room present, daring any to come forward and defy her. Mado could feel why she had ranked 15th and had no doubt that she could kill him if she wanted to. The teachers, Rebecca said. I know you said there's something to pull the headmaster and mistress away, but there'll still be dozens of lecturers on campus." Julia shook her head with a smirk painted on her pretty face. "A few out of those dozens are on our side, Becca, and a good chunk of those who are not have already gone home for the break. Those on our will cast a veil around the first year's section of the function, and any left within shall be dealt with." That seemed to satisfy Rebecca enough to keep her quiet. She was a black girl with the best set of teeth Mado had ever seen and long braided hair that he had a strong compulsion to grab and pull. After that, the meeting had been adjourned. Mado walked back to the boys' dormitory alongside Liam and JJ, a British-born Nigerian boy from a magician family in Lagos. "They told me that we were going to make chaos and then blame the pragmatist faction," Mado muttered. "But the more I speak to you, all of you in fact, the more I see that this is all a lie." JJ's laugh sounded like a pair of ducks fighting. "You noticed, huh? Yes, it looks like they sold us each a dream. I think whoever planned this did it to hide their true intentions. If it all goes tits up, we'll all have different reasons to throw the council off the true scent." "Then why must we commit to it?" Mado asked, searching for the answer between his two friends? For better or for worse, Liam was his friend. He had finally come to terms with it after not seeing him for a few days and actually feeling happy when they crossed paths again. But JJ was still a stranger to him, despite the mild enjoyment he got from his company. "Because we were given a mission." Mado was surprised by how serious Liam sounded, for such seriousness was a rare sight on him. "I'm not sure how things are for y'all, but for me and Liv, we don't have much say in this. Our master demanded this of us, and if we didn't want to do it, we should have been able to say no and kill him if he pressed the issue." Mado looked at him like he was crazy, and the expression made Liam grin. "Oh, come on now, Mado. You didn't think I was just some nice old boy from America who'd come here to get himself some of the good queen's education?" "King now," JJ corrected. "The source is a resource," Liam continued, completely ignoring JJ's correction. "No different from oil, no different from gold. It's only natural that we try to kill each other for it, as we have done for thousands of years. Why should that be any different now?" Mado shook his head in disagreement. "The weak don't deserve to suffer, Liam. Man made laws to stop these things from happening for a reason." The laugh that erupted from his friend made his gums itch and his fists clench. "Laws exist because the powerful became too weak to keep down the masses, Mado. Not because of some moral enlightenment, but because the peasantry became too educated, too aware of their numbers' advantage. And so what if there's a system that allows for there to be laws? It don't stop the strong from taking advantage of it and rising to the top. Laws change the game, but the powerful come out on top anywho. It allowed for the CEO and capitalist to replace the king and his barons. That's all." Mado had thought of a counterpoint to this, but could not find the words in English. And the process of translating these words became increasingly impossible the angrier he became. Is not. His anger began to grow until he felt a hand on his shoulder. "You got this," Liam said, and Mado turned to see that same easygoing smile he'd come to know back on Liam's face. "Take a deep breath and think through what you need to say. It don't gotta be perfect, just enough to be understood. I'll finish it off for you if you need me to. You know I will. And sorry if I made you mad, Mado." His fists unclenched, and so he was able to exhale his anger. "Thank you. I forgive you." "Thank the gods," JJ exclaimed, wrapping his arm around both their shoulders. "I thought that I was going to have to get in between you two." Liam laughed and pointed at Mado. "Nah, he likes me too much." Mado couldn't help but slowly begin to laugh with them. "Take a minute to think it through," Liam said, patting him on the back. "I like listening to you talk. It sounds like a radio with bad signal sometimes, but you got a good head on your shoulders. Meanwhile, I'd like to hear from JJ. What say you?" JJ frowned and pointed a skinny finger at himself. Me? Liam rolled his eyes. No, the boy behind you. Of course, you dummy. JJ's frown slowly turned into a grin as he checked to make sure that the coast was clear. Well, my reasons aren't so philosophical like you lot, unfortunately. Simply put, I want to help upend the world order. Both Maddow and Liam wore an expression of surprise that was quickly noted by JJ, who rolled his eyes in response. You lot are joking. You ask for my opinion and then act like I wasn't capable of giving one in the first place? No, Maddow said quickly. It's just, you don't seem like an anarchist at all. Liam finished off his thought perfectly. JJ looked like an average skinny black kid with a bad posture. He had a fade that needed to be trimmed back into shape yesterday and a boyish face with full lips, acne, and a big nose. The first thing Maddow would punch were the two ever to get into a fight. My mentor doesn't look like the anarchist type either, he sheepishly admitted. But no, I'm not an anarchist. We just want to remove the council from power is all and build something better over it. Liam was about to say something when he caught sight of someone he knew and waved. Hey, Salem. From a group of students walking by, a pretty black girl with a large afro turned and waved back at Liam. She started to walk toward them when he gestured for her to come over. Calling a lady over ain't very gentlemanlike of you, Liam, she said as she came in for a quick hug. Maddow's heart started beating fast and hard as he got a good look at her. She had large and pretty brown eyes with a cut nose and thin top lip. Please don't introduce me. Please don't introduce me. Please. I want you to meet some of my people, Liam said, turning to gesture toward them. Y'all, this is Andrea Salem, the only other person I know from the only country in the world worth a damn. She rolled her eyes at him. Bruh, people like you are why the world hates us. They hate us 'cause they ain't us, Andy. Andrea ignored him as she stepped forward to better introduce herself. Hey, y'all, my name's Andrea Salem. I'm from the part of the USA that isn't filled with obnoxious and incestuous hicks. Liam pouted. Hick? JJ said. A pleasure to meet you. I'm a redneck, not a goddamn hick. Nice to meet you, JJ. Andrea then turned toward Maddow, who had not moved once since she got there. Her smile never left her face, but her eyebrow did go up as her hand went unshaken. Hi, I'm Andrea. Not a handshake kind of guy, I see. No worries. This here is Maddow. He's shy. Liam laughed. He'll lie and say it's 'cause his English isn't any good. It ain't. But his American is more than peachy. American? Andrea laughed. Golly, you're making me hate America the more you talk. She turned back to Maddow and her pretty smile softened. What language does he prefer to speak then? Liam scoffed. French, Andrea. Can you believe it? Andrea laughed again and then rolled her eyes. Your friend has a big mouth, she said in French, and Maddow gulped, feeling his hands get clammy. You speak French? Badly, she admitted. But I understand better than I talk. So you can speak French to me if you'd like, and I can reply in English. She turned to look at a shocked Liam and smirked at him. Sorry, I meant American to you. Deal? Maddow slowly felt his lips curve upward. You have yourself a deal. Andy, a girl called from the group she had been walking with. Aisling is on the phone. Says she wants to call you names again. Andrea shouted, I'm coming, before she turned back to smile at the three of them. I gotta get going. Y'all gonna be at the end-of-term party, right? Liam chuckled. Will we? You have no idea, Andy. I ain't been part of a shindig this big in a while. His eyes then intensified as he looked at her. But I'd suggest you miss it if you can. I hear those parties can get a little out of control. She waved away his words as she began to walk back toward her friends. And miss out on all the fun? Hell nah. I need to let my hair down anywho. Those practicals kicked my ass. So, we'll see you then. Bye, guys. Bye, the three of them said in unison as they waved at her. JJ slowly turned toward Liam. She seems nice. Yep, Liam said as he resumed their walk toward the dorms. "Great girl, can't do magic worth a damn though, so she's gotta go, unfortunately." Maddow stopped in his tracks and glared at Liam, who seemed confused for a moment before he threw his head back and laughed. "Don't tell me you've gone and gotten yourself a crush now, Maddow, my man." JJ laughed with him. "Already? Maddow, you really need to go out more." He felt his ears burn as they resumed their walk. "Killing the weak," he said, trying to finally respond to Liam's earlier provocations, "is not what I want." Liam raised an eyebrow but kept his eyes forward as they finally arrived. "Oh? Tell me then, what do you want?" Maddow remembered the feeling of being weak and at the mercy of the strong, and how the world did not seem to care for his suffering. The memory brought back such anger that he was certain he was going to black out again. Slowly he exhaled and regained control over himself. "Justice," he said. "I want justice. So it begins." 19th of November, 19:07 p.m. GMT. Valentina had expected Cassandra, Bartholomew, and Rogers to be here, but she was surprised to see Robertson counting himself among their number. The man was a lover of magic through and through, but the only thing that took priority over that love was his passion for teaching. "Professor Shevchenko," the man said, unable to hide his surprise at seeing her. "I would have thought you were long gone, returned home." She smiled and tossed her golden hair back over her shoulder. "The same could have been said of you, Barden. Has the weather up in Scotland scared you off for good then?" He snickered as the final member of their troupe of betrayers arrived. Although she was a stranger to Valentina and seemingly to everyone else except Professor Rogers. "Patrick," the red-haired American woman said softly, moving toward the center of the room. "It has been a while." "Not long enough," the tall professor retorted, smiling to show that it was all in jest. Her brown eyes glared at him for a moment and did not dare look anywhere else until he muttered an apology. She nodded once, but did not take her eyes off him. "You were joking. I see that now. But any more jokes out of you and I'll put your heart in my pocket." Patrick was tall, strong, and someone Valentina would consider a competent magician. Thus it was quite the sight to see him prostrate himself before a woman who came up to Valentina's shoulder and looked like she weighed as much as Sarah. The woman was dressed in a tan suit and clean white shirt tucked into her suit pants. She wore her red hair in a braid that sat over her shoulder and hung low enough to touch her stomach. Freckles that circled around a Roman nose and thin pink lips dotted her face. "Most of you have been brought here for different reasons," she said in a voice that was stern and harsh, which did not seem fitting for a woman her size. She appeared to be of an age with Valentina, who herself looked like she was in her early 30s, but magicians her age could range from 60 to almost a century. Whatever that reason is irrelevant. The only thing that matters is that we all agree that the council has had its day. There were murmurs of agreement, but none dared to interrupt her now. Tonight will be remembered throughout all of time, and rightfully so. But what must be achieved cannot be if there are those among us who have doubts. And so, I must ask, are there those among us? Initially, there was the silence she had expected, but her eyes grew 3 sizes larger when she noticed Barden stepping forward. "Professor?" She took a step forward. "I hope this is not you admitting to second thoughts." Barden laughed and shook his head. His green eyes were just as intense as the American's, but filled with more glee than her obvious vitriolic annoyance. "Never, my lady. I only mean to humble myself before you to ask a question." She glared at him silently, as she had done to Patrick. Unfortunately for her, however, Barden was not the sort to be scared so easily. "What are you asking for exactly, Professor? Are you begging for a reward?" Barden's chuckle gave even Valentina chills. "No, oh no. The opportunity to test my skills against worthy foes is a boon all on its own." He glanced at every member present in their deadly alliance before continuing. I only mean to ask whether you will fight alongside us." Her eyebrow rose as she turned to face him fully, the annoyance subsiding and replaced by mild interest. "I just might." "Why?" "I wish to see the height of sorcery," Barden exclaimed as if the answer were obvious. It unleashed without restraint. What else could come close to such beauty in all of the world? She said nothing for a moment before a small smile broke through her stern expression. "What is your name?" "Barden," the man said as he bowed. "Professor Barden Robertson, at your service." "You reek of ambition, Barden, and I like that. Focus on the task at hand and worry about all else later. Our gods are real, and because they are real, they will reward true service." That comment took Valentina's breath away and sent her heart rate racing. She had grown up in a religious home, and so the act of worship was not new to her. In fact, it had once brought her peace of mind. But the way of things had changed, and according to her, not for the better. "We need maximum chaos and casualties. Reduce the number of children to the top 150. I alone will bring forth the veil to shield the massacre," the woman said. Rogers frowned. "All on your own? The fog does not exist in Calridia, my lady. Are you—" She was behind Rogers by the time Valentina's eyes were able to locate her again. Rogers had a mark on his forehead that she had never seen before, and his neck was covered in veins as he attempted to move, but could not. "You'll rupture and tear something before you can move freely again," the woman warned him. "But you are welcome to try. Hell, I'll even help you. Go on then. 98% of you have my permission to move, but you should—" Rogers jumped forward and spun around, prepared to face his attacker, when he fell to his knees and screamed in pain. A red organ hovered in the air where he last stood and soon thudded to the ground. It took Valentina a moment to realize that the organ was Rogers' liver. "I told you so." The woman's smile turned into a sickening grin. Valentina had never seen a spell like that in her life and couldn't imagine a spell so powerful being performed without an incantation or even a hand sign. "The next person to question me, good or bad, dies." She kicked the organ toward Rogers, who was hunched over in pain and coughing up blood. "Heal yourself. You have 5 seconds to do so, and if you can't, then I'll put you out of your misery." Valentina was not sure if Rogers had mastered that art, but it seemed so as she detected his reserves dropping heavily. "He is as good as dead," Valentina noted. With his reserves at their current levels, she could kill him with little worry, never mind the sort of carnage a woman like Goldman would unleash on him. The woman was on the verge of speaking, then stopped, pouted for a moment, and finally a grin emerged on her face. "Barden?" "Yes, my lady," he said, bowing his head. "How may I serve you?" "Which of your opponents is the strongest?" Barden took a moment to think it through before saying, "It is between Anderson and Goldman, my lady." They were the two Valentina would have chosen as well had she been the one asked. "And why are they the strongest?" she asked, and it was Cassandra who volunteered to answer. "If I may, my lady, Anderson fought in the American Civil War and does not have a gray hair on his head. It speaks to how substantial his reserves are." The woman laughed and clapped her hands together. "An American is one of the most powerful lecturers in an English college? Sounds about right. And this Goldman, what makes her so powerful?" "She is an animal," Cassandra said plainly, and Valentina could not have explained it better. "Then that will be your punishment, Rogers." She glared down at him. "You will fight Goldman alone." A thought dawned on their master, so much so that there might as well have been a light bulb that appeared above her frizzy red hair. "In fact, all of you will fight your counterparts one-on-one. I will not sully myself by fraternizing with the weak. Show me that you are worthy of my time and the consideration of my God. Now go." Valentina and Barden darted in the same direction. The two shared a glance before Barden spoke first. "Consider going for Anderson, and I will kill you." For once, Valentina was glad Barden was as crazy as he was and turned left to head toward Gwynedd. The students had gathered in their section of the college, and Valentina's ears winced from the music being spewed out by the DJ they hired. She felt the veil go up and was astonished by how quickly the woman was able to do it. The fog existed in the human world as an invisible blanket that covered the eyes of the weak, and thus was easy to manipulate and throw up a veil. Calridia, however, was a different matter entirely. Here, the hide-and-seek took minute portions of the citizenry's magic to hide their community, and thus there was no fog to help her. This is purely from her own magical reserves, Valentina noted, and the display of power only fortified her resolve. If she could be gifted even a third of such power, she would have lived a happy life. 13 seconds after departing, she found herself standing outside Gwynedd's apartment door and was amused at how close she had come to knocking. "I'm here to kill the man," she thought, "not invite him out to evening tea." Gwynedd was a nice and kind old man who had once been a truly terrifying powerhouse during his time, but was now on the other side of his peak. Valentina's green eyes turned blue as she cocked her right fist back and focused her magic into the open palm of her left. Better to make short work of the old man than drag this out. He deserves that much. Time and distance hear my call. Paradox and intervals, come forth to half and quarter again. She had located Gwynedd by detecting his aura and estimated the distance between them at 12 feet using her passive distance detection ability. That distance had been cut to 6 feet and then 45.72 centimeters before Valentina threw her right fist, concentrating her shrouding around it. The punch would have caved in his skull had he not thrown up his shrouding in time. Her knuckles only succeeded in dislodging the mandible from the rest of the skull. The punch sent him out the window of his apartment and bouncing several times off the hard tiling of the courtyard beneath his quarters. Gwynedd was back on his feet by the time she landed in front of him, holding his jaw in place as he quickly healed it. "Professor Shevchenko? This is a rather inauspicious time for a duel, do you not think?" Valentina smiled and shook her head. "You were always a pleasant man, Nate. It is no wonder that you eventually lost your edge." The man's long gray mustache moved upward as he smiled. "Lost? No, my dear. The edge was not lost, only hidden. Mother Nature, keep me grounded." He brought his fists down and slammed into the ground, sending a tidal wave of earth crawling toward her. "Half and quarter again," she shouted, slamming her fist against Gwynedd's forearms in time for the tidal wave of earth to collide with his back. He stopped the earth like Moses parting the Red Sea and lowered it to ensure his head was beneath her swing. She had to quickly block the fist of earth tearing through the tiles to collide with her knee. Valentina winced as a heavy backhand collided with her right flank. She bounced like a skipping stone, crashing into the room the lecturers gathered to break their fast. She was back on her feet, her shrouding having saved her ribs from shattering. Just barely. Fuck. He appeared before her, covered in a suit of earth and tiling that convinced her that exchanging blows would not be a good idea. She ducked a second too soon, but cut the distance again so that when he did finally throw the punch intended for her head, it missed by a mile. Valentina growled as she launched her fist upward, shattering the earth and tile beneath Gwynedd's chin and focusing her palm outward. She had not said an incantation that time, and the loss of magical reserves was punishment for it. Valentina would not be making that mistake again. "Source of life," Valentina said, channeling water from the pipes below to strike at Gwynedd, keeping him in the air long enough to concentrate a significant portion of her magic into her fist. "I'll end this here and—" "Grounded!" he shouted. Valentina let out a scream as a spear made of earth tore out from the ground and ripped its way through her stomach. Gwynedd came down with a hammer fist that would have killed her had Valentina not used a good chunk of her reserves to throw off his blow by halving his distance and then quartering it again. This caused his chin to strike her head instead of his fists. "Wind burst!" she shouted before spitting a stream of the air that tore through his brow and snapped his head back. Valentina took the break to launch herself backward, tearing herself free of the spear and revealing the extent of the damage. "This is bad." "From the source came life," she said, saving herself from expending too much of her magical reserves to fix the hole that Gwyn had made. The water from the pipe still sprouted from the ground, acting as a sprinkler that drenched them and the room in water. The tables and chairs that were once filled by her and her colleagues were scattered now. The man who was so giving with his advice and kind words stood in front of her as her enemy. His suit pants covered his lower half, and his barrel chest, covered in hair and muscles, was bare of any such clothing. His eyes, usually low and drooping, were alive now, focused on her and only her. Valentina, in contrast, must have looked quite the sight. Her pretty golden hair was matted against her skull, and her face was covered in a mix of sweat and water as she tried to get her breathing under control. Her camo pants were in tatters, and her black compression shirt had a large hole in it. "Spatial magic," he said to her. "You have chosen a good art to master, Valentina. It suits you well. Well done." From just about anyone else in her life, this comment would have come off as condescending. But from Nathaniel Gwynedd, Valentina had no doubt in her mind as to the authenticity of it. "Thank you, Nathaniel." There was a life snuffed out, and she could tell from his expression that he had felt it as well. He closed his eyes and shook his head. Was that Professor Rogers? She really is an animal. It might just be. The world feels a lot less annoying. Nathaniel frowned, and she raised her hand to stop his incoming lecture. Yes, Nathaniel, that was not very kind of me." "What is it that you seek to achieve here, Professor?" he asked. It was a credit to him that he had the patience to wait so long. "About time," Valentina muttered. "I was beginning to wonder if you had almost expected that I was going to kill you." "No," he answered, before a silly grin crossed his face. "I never once suspected that you'd ever try to kill me." Valentina laughed, but frowned immediately when she saw him move to put a chair up and sit back down. "Explain this to me, if you'd be so kind." "Nathaniel," she rolled her eyes, "this is a fight to the death." "You need time to recuperate," he said, "and I am giving it to you. If this fight to the death should happen, then let you be at your best, and me at my least ignorant." "You're a good man, Nathaniel." She found a chair to sit on before sighing and gesturing for him to have the floor. "Okay then, ask." "What is this about?" he asked, looking far off in the distance before his eyes returned to her. "I feel Cassie and Professor Kumar going at it now. And are Robertson and Anderson fighting as well?" She grinned and nodded her head. "I almost wish I could kill you quickly so that I may go and watch that fight with my own eyes." Nathaniel placed his large hands on his belly as he laughed. "It will be a good reward for the winner of this fight, eh? But still." The laughter died immediately. "You have yet to answer my question, Valentina." She sighed again and folded her arms. "Why does this feel like my father is reprimanding me?" "The Council and its New World Order are rotten, Nathaniel, and I no longer wish to live in a world where we are enslaved to them." "Enslaved?" He sounded confused. "Rotten? Miss Shevchenko, you are too young to know what the Council has done for our society." Valentina had had coffee less bitter than her laugh. "Oh? Is that why they have removed prayer and worship of the source?" "They have not removed." "Restriction of worship is no different, Nathaniel," she snapped, "and that alone would be insult enough. But if they did it for good reason, then perhaps it would be easier to swallow. No, they do it for selfish reasons, to keep the power to themselves." "This is a topic better suited for Kyle," he muttered, "but I will try my best. Valentina, the source is a good thing to use and operate, less so to worship. Worship of it leads to losing oneself. The source takes in all feelings and emotions, and thus, when you welcome it into your soul with worship, it will feed you those emotions and feelings as well. It will reward what you're best at and punish you by amplifying your worst traits tenfold. She said nothing for a moment, allowing the two of them to track the battle between Barden and Anderson. "How many members of the council are there, Nathaniel?" He frowned, but confusion would not stop him from being the lecturer he was. 100. Why? And how many are from families with a Notre Animus? It then dawned on him where she was going with this, and he chuckled to himself. 80 of them or so. 80% of the council positions belonged to families who had sworn their souls to gods to elevate themselves to the powers they are now, and it is just a coincidence that the outlawing of worship and religion has led to no more of that? Nathaniel said nothing for a moment before he nodded his head. That is a good point. There has been no new case of this since the council has imposed their power over the world. A fair trade, if you ask me. Our society is less the wild, wild west than it used to be. She stood up from the chair. Not for me, Nathaniel. I wish to reach the heights of my magic and do so unfettered by hypocrites and cowards. The world was filled with the worst kinds of people back then, Valentina, he said, refusing to rise. Believe me, I was one of them. I had a yearning for knowledge and history that made me the envy of my village. My parents worked themselves to the bone to send me off to university when it became apparent that I had an aptitude for academia. I stumbled upon my master in London, and she showed me the world of magic. My hunger for knowledge took on a new life of its own. I lived at the library and did nothing else but read endlessly, consuming more and more knowledge. By the time I pulled my head out of my books, I was able to become a renowned lecturer and professor with ease. Valentina rolled her eyes. Is this your cautionary tale, Nathaniel? That you went off and became everything your parents wanted you to be? He sighed heavily, and the sadness on his face made her heartache to see. Sure, but they never knew it, he said as he stood back up. By the time I had pulled my head out of my books, I had heard that I had missed their funerals by 10 whole years. They had died, not knowing whether or not I became what they had hoped for. My father died due to a sickness he had gotten working so much in the coal mines, and my mother from falling down the stairs. She spent 3 hours in a pool of her own blood with no one present to save her. He cracked his back and held his arms out to show her just how immense a human being he was. My gluttony had killed my parents, and now I'll make sure it kills you. Valentina wanted to ask him to surrender, to stand aside and allow the inevitable to happen. Their relationship warranted that much, but she could not bring herself to say those words, to make such a request, knowing that it would be turned down. And so instead, Valentina Shevchenko simply said, "Come and try me."